a lot of work in fluids kind of happens with an engineering application in mind. It's not necessarily just for the sake of the fundamental understanding. So if you've got that kind of work where you have a specific engineering application, but that required you to sort of look at things in a non-dimensional, in a fundamental way, then flow would be the appropriate journal for it in some ways, because you can motivate your work entirely from a specific application, but then you can say, well, we distilled down this to this fundamental concept which we explored, and then we were able to use that fundamental concept in this application in this way. So that would be the unique aspect of flow, I think, whereas JFM is probably a little bit more on the fundamental side, and the other kind of engineering journals are much more on the applied side. I'm more of an engineer than a physicist, so I kind of usually look for applications and then kind of synthesize some fundamental problems from it. I mean, there are several examples for, we work a lot on, unmanned aerial vehicles, building and flying them. So one example I have is we initially built a membrane wing based unmanned vehicle, and we then, in the process of building it and flying it around, we realized we don't have the control ability of the vehicle as much as we would in other circumstances. And then we realized that might be because the membrane wing that we had actually would have, flow induced flutter, because they were kind of vibrating because the flow is not steady at all times, and then the membrane itself, almost like a sail of a yacht or a of a sailcraft. So it had this kind of unsteady behavior. So that kind of motivated us to kind of go back in with wind tunnel experiments, where we can look at that problem in isolation, and the things we've learned from that we can kind of implement back into the UAV that we are actually constantly sort of developing. So, that's one example. I mean, the other example is the work that we did with plesiosaurs, coming in from paleontology, where we had this application on how do these plesiosaurs swim. The question really came to us from paleontology, saying, we have this specific problem where we have this animal with two sets of flippers, and we are not sure if there is a hydrodynamic kind of benefit for its swimming performance. And so we ended up, synthesizing that into a specific, into a fluids problem, and then just doing a whole series of sort of simulations and water tunnel experiments, where we were able to show the benefit of having two flippers and how they should actually be using those two flippers. And then that allowed us to kind of make contributions in the paleontology world. I mean, a lot of these practical applications don't necessarily directly translate to numerical work immediately. So sometimes you're going to have to say, well, this is a problem. I'm going to have to do some experiments to figure out what the important non-dimensional numbers are. And that's perfectly fine. If you can say, well, we did these range of experiments because we didn't know where to start. And then from those experiments, we were able to figure out these kind of interesting parameters. But in a narrow sense of that application, that's actually a good contribution for flow. Yeah. So I think the thing I'm most excited about is the hope that we can come up with some new fundamental understanding based on specific technical problems. And hopefully that understanding that we develop can be applied now across lots of different problems we just didn't know about, right? Like, so what would be nice to be involved, at least at the stage as an editor, is to say, well, here is a specific problem that's we are really concerned about, and here is the flow physics that kind of helps you address that problem. Given that both that information is there in the paper, then people who are working on either that application can get the fundamental, or they can say, well, I have this other problem, I don't know what the fundamental concept is. They can get that as well. So that dual nature of kind of, value for a potential reader is what I'm kind of really, I mean, I am excited because I want to learn that as well. I mean, not just from a reader's perspective. As an editor, it would be great for me. Every time I handle a paper, I learn many new things.